Y'all, welcome back to Jess Klein's Big Table. I'm so excited for you to hear from my guest today. Shannon Downey, also known as Badass Cross Stitch, is an artist, activist, craftivist, community builder, and general instigator. Her work moves people from passive consumers of art into engaged creators and leverages craft-based art forms to bring people together, present them opportunities to transition from makers to change makers, and inspire radical hope for what is possible. Shannon is a firebrand. I loved talking to her so much. She's so clear on her role in the world, how to be of service, how to bring people together, how to move things forward in a beautifully simple way. And she has a brand new book out, Let's Move the Needle, an activism handbook for artists, crafters, creatives, and makers. I put the link in the show notes. Go get this book. Please enjoy this conversation with Shannon Downey. Shannon, thank you so much for being here today.
I'm so excited to be here, Jess. I feel like this is such a good example of how weird life is. I spent my college years at the Iron Horse watching you perform and just being like, oh my God, I love this. And I love Voices on the Verge and this is great. And ever since then, soda water is always in every play mix that I make. And I just have this lovely connection to you. And then all of a sudden oh, now it's 20 years later and I'm sitting down to have a chat with Jess. That's amazing.
Yes, I love that so much. That makes me feel like that has faith in the world.
Right?
It's
so nice. It's nice.
Yeah. I was so excited I'm not a crafter or any of that. And so when I started checking out your stuff, I was like, this is fucking amazing. Yeah, I guess I want to start off with just what was your cultural background and how do you feel that informs who you are and what you're up to now?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Boston and Weymouth, Massachusetts, and super Irish Catholic area and world, and I am very Irish and Irish American and raised in the Catholic Church. But my dad was he was the president of the Pipefitters Union in Boston. It was, union his entire career. And so I grew up on picket lines and with a house full of men from the union and the labor movement, making signs, and just, it really was this, for me, this super fun thing that happened all the time. And I recognize now that they were fighting for justice and their rights and whatever. But for me, I was just oh my God, everybody just comes to my house and hangs out and we make signs and we eat pizza. And then we go stand on the bridge with our signs and people beep at us and we wave. Wow. And it's so exciting. And, voting was always the biggest day every year because, my dad was always a poll monitor or a precinct captain or, depending on what the year was. And so voting day was so fun because I would get to go to the polls and we would hang out and I would see all the people and there was candy and it was just this big social occasion. So I had this real labor movement, democracy, upbringing without even realizing that, that was sort of unique. And it absolutely informed how I move through the world and everything that I do. And then my grandmother was a Lowell mill girl, so she worked in the mills from when she was 13 to 70.
Wow.
Yeah. So she was on the weaving machines and she met my grandfather there and he was a bobbin setter. And so we have this rich textile history in addition to labor. And so it just was this confluence of all of my ancestors, all of my elders, just sort of how I was brought up and raised. And I didn't see it coming, which is the funniest part, right? If you had told me, 15 years ago, even oh yeah, you're going to make your entire living and life mission as an art activist and you're going to embroider and I'm what are you talking about?
Yeah. What switched?
I It was, yeah, good question. So like my career was always in movement building and community organizing, and I own a marketing company, but I was always working with nonprofits and social enterprises and movements. So I was always in the work, but I was not a maker. And then I was like, this is so funny. I learned how to cross stitch in 5th grade. And I had to make a pink bunny in profile with a blue eye. And I just remember thinking, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. Like, bunnies aren't pink. They don't have blue eyes. What am I going to do with this? So I just did it because I loved my teacher. And so I would do anything she asked. I gave it to my parents and never
I love
thought
that you're
about
already critical thinking. You're like, no, this isn't.
I was like, this
not
is
what bunnies are like.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I thought that like cross stitch and embroidery were dumb. And then 20 years later, I'm running this digital marketing company. I'm on a device all the time. I hate everything. I have no good ideas. My creativity is zapped. I'm on Etsy, as one does.
Yeah.
And I come across this like Star Trek Captain Picard cross stitch pattern. And I'm like, oh my God, nobody loves Captain Picard more than me. That's hysterical. I think I remember how to do this. Let me download it. Let me stitch. Let me see. Like, I don't know. There was just something that called to me. So I stitched this perfect little Captain Picard. And I was like, oh, that was so fun. And then the next day I had like 3 good ideas. I felt like alive.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
And I realized that like the content in 5th grade had made me disconnect from the medium, but it wasn't actually the medium. I love the medium.
Yeah.
And so when I found content that like amused me and I connected to it, and I realized, oh, I actually really love this medium. And it was just giving me a lot of creativity and a lot of life, and putting down my device and using my hands and more analog in my life. So I just kept stitching, and I was stitching, patterns and stuff, and then other people's work. And then I started to use it to stitch around what I was working on. Like, so I was getting overwhelmed. I was working on gun violence in Chicago at the time. I was really overwhelmed. I stitched a gun because I was like, I've never even held a gun. I have no connection to this tool that is being, and so I stitched a gun, and I had a lot of thoughts, and I wrote them down. And then I went to Instagram, and I was like, I don't know, do other people want to talk about this with me? Like, would that be a thing?
Yeah.
So I posted the picture, I posted the text, and then everybody wanted to talk to me about it. And like this beautiful conversation started happening online where I was like, can we have productive conversations on social media? I don't know.
Yeah.
And we did. And I was like, oh, this is wild. And so I kept doing it and kept doing it. And then people were like, I want to learn how to do this. Like, can we get together and you can teach us? And I was like, I think so.
Yeah.
Like, I think I know enough to teach.
Yeah.
And that led to this really beautiful, like, community events. And it, like, almost didn't matter that we were stitching. It was really the conversations that were happening and the connections that were being formed. And I thought, wild. I never would have thought that this would be the greatest community organizing tool I've ever used.
Yeah.
And it just like really all blew up from there.
That's just amazing. I love every piece of that. And I have there's like so many different questions I have for you. But one thing I can really relate to, like I've heard you talk about on other podcasts and stuff, like the physical nature of the cross stitch and how that's part of what makes it empowering. And I mean, I feel that when I hold my guitar, I'm like, this is real. Like I'm making something. I'm like, I hold this thing in my hands, or I can feel the voice coming out of me, and that's how I know like I'm alive. I'm not just like interacting with a screen, etc. I guess does it feel like an embodied, like, is it the physicality of it?
Yeah, a lot of it is, for sure.
Okay.
It just, it's slow, it's methodical. A lot of times it feels like a meditation. I used to stitch in silence, because there was just really something about that, but also the like EMDR of the floss, like going through the fabric and the needle, like it's deeply satisfying. I stitch too much now to do that because I started to like hurt my vision.
Wow.
Like, oh, that's interesting, because like I never look up because I'm always in it.
Yeah.
And so now I have to have the TV on because it like forces me to look up more.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't change the experience of the tactile and that idea of like I'm making something, right?
Yeah.
I think I don't feel that same satisfaction when I make something on my computer or through a screen. Like when I use my hands and I'm like, I made that.
Yeah.
It's just a different feeling. And I feel like it opens up different parts of you.
It feels primal.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh yeah, I'm a person in a body. I have a body.
Yes.
I'm not just use
it.
Yeah. I'm just like a floating head.
Right. I'm not just my thoughts. Like and this device that is always in my hands. And so that's the other part that I love about it is like I put my device down, I forget I have it, right? And I'm using my hands in this way that it's familiar, right? Because we're so used to our devices now. But it just feels so different and so satisfying, and like really just gives me a lot of space to think substantively, which I think we don't have enough of in this world.
Yeah, a lot of the folks I've been talking to lately, and of course it's not a new idea, but just like that we need to slow down. We have to slow down, and it feels like, I mean, in order to actually affect change, like it has to happen, the urgency that comes with like capitalism and white supremacy and stuff, and it's so simple yet subversive, yet for some reason hard for so many people to get quote unquote back to, is to do something slowly and intentionally, and this has a larger purpose. I have just so many things I want to ask you. So would you talk a little bit about what tends to unfold when you bring together a group of people, like ostensibly to learn cross stitch, and then maybe something else? Will you just share what happens typically in your classes?
Yeah, I'm really obsessed with making sure that everybody coming into the room immediately feels connected to me and to other people in the room, because I think what I've seen in a lot of workshop spaces is it's just sort of like you come in, you sit down, somebody teaches you something, you do it. It's pretty uncomfortable because you're trying something new, right? And that's always a little uncomfortable. And then you leave. And people who come with like a little group sit together with their little group and they talk to their little group. And people who come alone cower in the corner,
Yeah.
Like, there's just this very real experience. And I am like, that can't be. Because if, like, I don't care if people like embroidery. Like, I literally don't care. Like, come do my workshop. If at the end you're like, I hate this, I'm like, cool, whatever. Did you connect with somebody in this room?
Yeah.
That is what matters to me. So when people come in, I am introducing myself to them immediately. I'm thanking them for being there. I'm introducing them to other people who have come in. I placed them in seats if I feel like there's a whole lot of back rowers happening,
Yeah.
We do a lot of like small talk and just like joking around to get people comfortable so that when we roll into the workshop, they're already chatting with each other and they're already feeling comfortable, and they don't feel super overwhelmed by the fact that they're about to learn something new, which as a grown-up can be really intimidating. We're so used to being the expert in the room at the one thing we've trained ourselves to be the expert at.
Yeah.
And then they show up and they're like, oh my God, I've never done anything like this. This is super overwhelming. And I'm like, oh God, I thought I closed everything.
Oh.
that wouldn't make a sound. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I didn't hear anything.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will pretend that didn't happen and carry on.
Okay.
Everyone else will too.
Yeah.
So, then I teach this workshop, and like my approach is very like, you can't do this wrong, right? Like, we're just making art, and like I really try to create the most positive and affirming space possible, and just like let go of any preconceived notions that like there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. Like, do you like how it looks? Cool, you did it right. That sort of stuff. But what's beautiful is that instruction is like a half an hour, and then we get to the stitching. And when we're stitching, we're just sitting around. And now everybody's got a little bit of a connection. Everybody's feeling far more comfortable, and we can start having the conversations. And so sometimes those are conversations that I'm facilitating around a specific topic, if that's the premise of why we're gathered. Other times, if we're just like, I'm going to introduce you to craftivism or embroidery, depending on the day, it's just sort of like, what are you creating and why? And then that leads to a lot of really interesting conversation and a lot of vulnerability and a lot of sharing. And the minute that you're vulnerable with people in a room, the dynamic shifts from strangers to like, burgeoning friendships, right? And like, I know I'm going into a community and then I'm going to leave in 2 hours. So I feel it is my responsibility in that room to facilitate community and connection, so that when I leave, that still exists, and that those people are still together and can continue on. And oftentimes that is what happens, and it's just glorious to me.
Yeah, that's also really amazing. And I was thinking while you said that of this thing my mom said to me when I was talking to her about the concept for this podcast, which she said, she said social justice is a really broad term, but when something happens to you personally or to your community or to, someone it becomes personal. It becomes much more specific. And so I was just thinking about how I'm imagining that when people are getting ready to stitch something, like what's the story? There's always, as a writer, I'm definitely invested in the power of story telling. Also, I just wrote this note down. Could we please have you facilitate this with world leaders and a couple of family Thanksgiving dinners?
As long as it's not my family Thanksgiving dinners, absolutely. Okay. just sitting down with Trump and Kamala, do a little stitchy.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Oh my goodness.
I would pay money to be able to do that. Let me in a room with them. Let's do this.
Maybe you can train someone else to do that with your own. Your own people.
That's the thing, right? Like, I feel like we should be swapping our familial responsibilities. Like, I'm going to come in and I'm going to handle your Thanksgiving, and you go to Boston and handle mine.
Yes, because it wouldn't be so charged and personal. And
I can't do this with my family. What? Absolutely not. No. I can do it with anybody else in the world.
Oh my goodness. Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, it's just like thinking about the work you're doing too, just like the power of community. So I don't know, versus waiting to be rescued by a politician or a hero do you feel like that's part of what you saw with the labor work in your house? It was like, we're doing this for us. We're organizing to do this for us. We're not waiting for.
Absolutely. Yeah. We save ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that is literally the biggest takeaway of everything that I do, is just like, stop waiting for other people. But also we live in such a charged environment, and because of social media, we have access to everything in a way we didn't have before. And therefore everything feels so overwhelming and just so like, I think the that's sort of the point sometimes of like how other people are organizing. It's like, let's distract them with as many things as we possibly can, true horrors and atrocities, and just like, let's make shit up and just like get them distracted and feeling overwhelmed. And so like, honestly, the point of my book is really about pick one thing and do it forever. And like, that's your thing. And everybody else is going to pick different things, right? And they're all going to be working on those issues. And all of these issues intertwine and overlap. But like, as long as we're all working on the thing, like, we can undo all of this together. But like, when we're constantly reacting to all of the things, it is immediate overwhelm, burnout. I need to go hermit. Like, I can't do this. Of course, when there are these sort of epic moments, we sort of pause what we're doing and we show up for other people because there's a need and a demand, right? Like, we're putting babies in cages. We're all dropping everything to make sure that that stops. And then when we've done what we need to do, or the movement leaders there feel like, okay, we're good, we can go back to what we were doing, you go back to your issue. And when you need help, you send out the call and everybody puts their things aside for a minute and shows up. And so I think that that's the most sustainable way to live an activist lifestyle, is to just sort of like, I'm doing this one thing. This is my issue. I'm going to be an expert at it. I'm going to understand it to its core. And I'm going to, work with other people who I align with on this, and we're going to change the world.
Yeah.
That is so much more sustainable and like manageable than, oh my God, I have to deal with this and now this and then this. And so it's like that constant reminder that you have to create for yourself of like, I have chosen what I've chosen. I'm sticking to this, and I will show up for others when I need to show up for others.
Yeah. That is such a good reminder. I feel like I needed to hear that today because it's like every time I mean, not that you're here for my personal like
I will be, Jess.
Okay,
I will be.
Can you be my therapist?
I'll be your activist therapist. This will be great.
Okay. That's awesome.
I'm here for this.
That's okay. But it's like so many times in my life, I have been like, am I focusing on the right thing? And every time I tune back in to when I get quiet, it's like, keep writing your songs, keep doing your art. And, cultivating the ability, I guess, to trust that. It's like when you are potentially, if you're looking at your phone, receiving a barrage of things that are saying that they're always more important, is like, I really like your method. Yeah.
It really feels like, and all of the things are important, right? And they are all pressing. Yeah. And if we let ourselves believe that we're supposed to be doing something about all of them, we end up doing nothing because we can't, because no human can do it all. And so, I often get asked like, you say this, but like, seem to be involved in every issue, Shannon. And I'm like, no. My job is to recruit and train activists. That is what I do. I trick them into hanging out with me to embroider, and they think that they're just going to embroider. And I'm like, yep. But actually, now you're an activist, and now I'm going to help you, right? Like, I'm going to meet you where you're at, and I'm going to give you all these resources to just keep moving, just keep doing more. And so I do have to know a lot about a lot of different issues, because I'm constantly trying to find the people who that's their issue. But I am working with movement leaders, and I'm saying, okay, what do you need? What's happening right now? Help me find a way to contextualize this for, a mass audience. And then I'm putting it out there, and I'm saying, here, if this is an issue that speaks to you, here are the 5 things you can be doing right now. Here are the people you need to be following and talking to. So it's really, truly about just like, can I be recruiting people for all of these issues, and how can I help facilitate that networking between people who are passionate about a cause but have no idea how to get into it with the people who are already deep in it and need help.
Yeah. This feels like a good time to ask you about your book, which is
Heyo.
coming out October
On Tuesday.
1st.
On
Woo!
Tuesday.
Whoop, whoop, whoop,
I
whoop.
can't even believe it.
So
It's
exciting.
literally been like 5 years of this really insular, like, it's just like all me in my head. And then like a little bit now I've got like, editors, that's fun. And then like, design team, that's fun. Like we're expanding a little bit. I cannot wait to be out in the world, like with people being like, finally we can talk about it. Please read
Yeah.
it, dear God.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So Shannon's new book, which is coming out October 1st, Tuesday, October 1st. Let's Move the Needle, an activism handbook for artists, crafters, creatives, and makers. What can people expect from your book?
I will start by saying it is not a craft book. Please do not expect crafts. So many people have been like, oh my God, is it like a pattern book? And I'm like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That is not how I roll. This is 100% an activism toolkit, right? And so what I find is now I've worked with hundreds of thousands of people, right? And they come to me, mostly women, through the venue of craft because they're like, I love craft, but I also love that you're sort of doing this subversive thing with it. That's sort of fun. Let's hang out. And then I'm like, yes, come to my workshop. And then I'm like, haha, now you're an activist. And here are all the tools that I have for you to like help you just get a little better every day, move a little further every day, do a little more every day. And now I have like hundreds of thousands of people being like, oh, hey, Shannon, how do I do this? How do I do that? What would you say about this? And I'm like, oh, I can't possibly respond to all of this.
Yeah.
And I thought, and I was like, I should write it all down. And then I did. And then it was a whole book. So it really is. It starts off with just like a little bit of context around me and like why and like, a little bit of what we've already talked about today. And then I move into some case studies throughout history to give some people an understanding that like we've been doing this shit forever and it's not new. We have a new word for it, if we like the word craftivism, which I do. And then it's like, okay, first step, you got to deal with your own shit. So here's a whole chapter on how we can start addressing all of the things that we don't want to address, which will make us an even better activist. And then it rolls into like, okay, if I need to find an issue, how do I do that? Right? How do I narrow it down? How could I possibly narrow it down, Shannon? I'm like, I got you.
Yeah.
And then we roll into literally, this is how you develop an activist lifestyle. If you wanted to start something, this is how you plan it. These are all the steps. And it's like, it's my process, right? And it's really meaty. There's like, I talk about spreadsheets, right? Like we're serious about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last chapter is literally a planning template that it can be applied for everything from like, I want to do this like one-off community project to I want to start a global movement. Like same structure, different scale.
That's amazing. I'm so excited. I know that y'all sent me a copy and I'm so excited. I haven't gotten it yet, but I'm hearing you talk about
you to get it.
Yeah. I'm just like, yeah, because that's so beautiful.
It's also chock full of my art because why not?
Yes.
It's just really fun. But I did do the audiobook, which was wildly fun.
Wow.
And so a lot of my friends, people that have a advanced copy have been listening to the audiobook and they're like, it's like you're in my living room talking to me. Like,
that's
yay.
amazing. Oh God, this is so cool. Okay. I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit about, I heard you talk on another podcast about the craftivism movement being like, we're crafters, we're kind of activists. Like, would you talk a little bit about like the idea, like this idea we have that like activism is a dirty word, or we don't want that label. It's too strident. Would you share with us? I feel like I understand why, but I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me how many people have come in through craft and therefore are like, I am a crafter and like I can use this in ways that challenge sort of narratives, and like I can use this in a sassy way. And then I'm like, cool. So that's not where it ends, right? Like, this is, if we're gonna be doing this, like,
Yeah.
we really need it to be activism forward with like a side of craft, right? Like, craft is and art is like a complement and a mechanism to use and implement in our activism. And what's happening, or what I see is, and there's nothing wrong with it, it's people who are coming into this work through craft, and therefore it's very craft forward. They're not necessarily comfortable with the word activist or the identity or label activist. For some reason, craftivist is some sort of like gentler version for them, and they're like, oh, but no, I could be a craftivist, but like, I'm not an activist. And so it's been a lot of like dissecting, okay, what does that word trigger in you? Like, because there is something.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, it's not necessarily that it's that ardent, strident. For some people, it absolutely is. But for others, it's just like, I don't have enough evidence to call myself an activist. Like, I don't feel like I'm doing enough. Even people who are doing so much are like, like, I wouldn't call myself that, because I don't feel like I have enough evidence to prove or to back this up. And my point is, like, if you're doing anything, you are an activist, and you get to claim that shit, because what do we lose by having more people who identify as activists? Absolutely nothing. We only gain.
Yeah.
And what people who are activists, and I'm using like the big A activists that everybody seems to be struggling to align with, what they need? Help. More help.
Yeah.
And what's the fastest way to get that help? More activists. And I think it's just a matter of like, we have to let go of this idea, and it's a capitalist idea, right? That, I can say, I'm making this up, like, I'm a librarian, I went to school for this, I work at a library, I get a paycheck, I am a librarian, like, super confident in that, right?
Yeah.
Because we have material evidence, and capitalism supports this idea that, yes, that your identity is your work. Congratulations.
Right.
And so when we are artists, when we are dancers, when we are makers, when we are activists, we don't get paid for that shit, right? Like, or maybe we do a little bit here and there, and therefore that's when, and it's interesting how it's that money, that capital exchange that starts to allow us to own these identities. And I'm saying, fuck all that. Like, if we're resisting capitalism and capitalist mentality, the first thing we have to do is resist this idea that money equals identity. And so it's a lot of just pushing people to rethink that. And like, you don't get to claim the title of craftivist if you don't also claim the title of activist. The word's right in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, you're a statement crafter. Fine, whatever. I just made that up, right? So I think it's just about helping people like really break down their own barriers around, like, why am I afraid of that identity? And I really think it's just this real capitalist training.
Yeah, I love the parallels between the creativity. To me, art, making music, it's like, it's just something you're coming up, you're just sort of channeling something, and you're coming up with it, and you're finding the people who resonate with it, and you're finding the people you can do it with. And I'm hearing that same energy and what you're talking about. It's like we are making this up as we go along to some degree. It's there's people who have been working on this a long time, and let's get with their ideas, but also there, it's not like you do this step and then, well, it is, but it's not like you get this degree and then you get paid this much. And it's like, there's I'm thinking about like Adrienne Marie Brown with the mushroom. She's always talking about like how mushrooms like propagate, and how it's much more organic, and that makes it sort of I just love this sort of almost unknown in that you don't know what could happen. Anything could connect, and you could be like, I'm making this with this person, and we're helping make this happen, and yeah,
It's gorgeous.
yeah, yeah. It's
And like that's what
yeah,
I'm about. I'm like,
yeah,
it's so boring to just get a degree and then go do a thing and like live your whole life doing that thing. Like what? I would melt, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so it's like finding the people who are living that life and being like, hey, want to change it up a little? Want to add a little something, something over here
yeah,
that isn't like directly correlated to the work that you do? Which is
yeah,
why so many people who come to my workshops are so anxious about it because they're so used to what they do and they understand it and they know it. And then they're coming in and I'm like, we're going to be creative. Also, I'm not even going to tell you what to stitch. You have to come up with it. And they're like,
yeah.
what are you talking about?
What?
I'm like, I know. What? But I will hold your hand through this. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, everybody leaves like with so much joy. They leave with so much joy. And they're just like, oh man, that was so fun. I was so nervous. And it's like, all right, let's make more of that. Because that, then they're going back to their lives and their job and their like every day. But they're thinking differently. Like they just had a moment where they were like, oh, weird, right?
Yeah.
I did something I've never done before. I used my hands. I was in community. We laughed. Like, I kind of want more of that. And that's all I'm about. Like, I just want you
Yeah.
to want more of that. And it doesn't have to be with me. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
go try a million things. Like, it's not about embroidery. That is not the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because it's like, yeah, they were scared. You got them to do the thing, and now it's like getting on the roller coaster. You're like, oh, I did it. I want to do it again.
Totally.
And I love the I've heard you say that before. Like, it's not about me. Like, if I did my job right, then this community is going to continue doing their thing after I'm gone.
Yes.
I think there's like a beautiful humility. Being an artist, I'm very used to like my own massive ego and like so it's refreshing to hear like, no, this isn't about me and my brilliance. It's like I imparted, this experience to these people, and now they're gonna continue on its own because it's so valuable. Oh gosh.
I love them. I love when they do it. I was in Utah in Salt Lake City and I did a community event at this like queer bookstore / community center. I don't even know how to describe it because I was like expecting a bookstore and walked in and I was like, what is this magical place with like a gender affirming closet where you could just go and take clothes and makeup and shoes and people would leave and it was all free. Oh, it's gorgeous.
Amazing.
So I'm like, I want to live here in this store. And so I did this workshop with all these amazing folks and they were like, this can't be the only time we do this. And I was like, I know. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And they're like, we should have a monthly meeting and like stitch up here. And I was like, you should. And they immediately went and talked to the owner and they're like, we want to do this. And the owner was like, hell yeah. And every month they get together and they do this. And I'm like, that, like, I could die. Like, I could die happy. Like, that is all I'm about is just like now that community exists and, they don't need me.
Yeah.
But they better show up when I go there for my book talk.
You're not off the hook yet.
Right? Don't forget about me. Don't forget about me. But like, yay, because it's not about me. But when I show back up, you better show up.
God.
Because I got a book to sell.
Yeah. Oh, God. Oh my God. Okay. What was I gonna ask you? Okay. So many questions. Let me try and hone in. Yeah, I guess more of a comment. I feel like you kind of already addressed this, but like, I think it's really interesting to hear you talk about, like you said, I don't know where I read this quote. What I'm most interested in is the power of art to not just move people emotionally, but to create opportunities for others to engage in activism in order to bring about actual social change. The question I'm always asking myself when I'm creating is simply, how will this move people to action? And I feel like people think about art as like, this is about feelings. How do you think you came to see art as an action tool versus just let's talk about our feelings?
Yeah, I would not have called myself an artist before like 10 years ago. And still I'm like, am I an artist? I mean, I am, but more than that, I'm this other thing. And so I've always looked at art as like, I've always most connected with art that moved me to do something. Right. And I think what's interesting, and maybe this is a controversial hot take, is like we just grow up with so much art made by men. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so much of that art, if you really look at it, is either the objectification of women or like really art about them, for them, by them. Right. Like it's really insular. And I was always just like, I mean, I guess, like I would go see this work and be like, okay, like I hope that whatever you process through that piece, you feel better about. But I'm looking at it being like, good for you.
Yeah.
It just, there's like a lot of self-serving vibe to a lot of it. And I never connected with that. And so the art that I did connect with was always like protest art, like Guerrilla Girls, Act Up, right? Like people who were using art in ways that I was just like, oh, that's what I want to see. Like I want to see art inspiring other people to go do things and like maybe even make art themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Like I never went to a museum and felt like, oh, I can't wait to go home and make art. I always went and was like, oh, God, like how do they do that? Or, like it just always seemed so inaccessible or not, like I didn't connect with it, or like pretty for the sake of pretty, like never made sense to me. I do think there's a space in this world for that and believe that it should exist, but I didn't connect with it. And so for me, when I just, started making, I was like, well, the only value in this, if I'm going to do this, is if what I'm creating is going to push people to think differently, act differently, do something, have a feeling, right? Like want to respond, want to then make art, right? Like, and I think because what I do is not hard, right? Like embroidery is not hard, and I can teach anybody in 20 minutes, right? And so folks are like, I could do that. And I'm like, yes, you could. Right? Versus a lot of art where it's like, I could do that. Like you go into a museum and you're like looking at, minimalism, modern shit. And you're like, I could do that. And you're like, yeah, but you didn't. And like, do you really want to? Like, is that really what you want to do?
Right. Yeah.
And so with my work, I'm just like, I have no ego around this. I know this shit isn't hard. Right? Like, I want you to all be able to do it because I want you to feel like you can be successful at this thing, and then you can use it to share your story, to share your voice, to find ways to think harder about the things that you think you have an opinion on.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I have to make a note here. That was really
okay.
Great. Okay. So I'm trying to keep this podcast to like, I feel like I want to talk to you all day, but I know that you have a life. You have to go inspire some other folks or hopefully take care of yourself. But is there anything else that you would like to touch on while I have you here? And yeah.
I mean, I could talk all day, Jess. What? You give me a microphone and ask me questions, and I'm like, yeah, let's do this.
I know, yeah. Well, I'm trying to think if I have any other burning questions right now. I feel like you covered a lot. Yeah, I guess I just want to first of all thank you for everything you're doing. I think I'm so inspired. I can't wait to read your book. Everyone go order Shannon's book. And you're doing a book tour?
Yes.
Yeah?
So no big deal. I leave on Tuesday. Everything's fine. Everything's fine, Jess. I'm
Cool.
totally fine.
You got this.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I start in Chicago. I do the whole East Coast for a couple weeks. And then, I made this super brilliant idea a year ago where I was like, okay, when my book comes out, I'm going to throw a rager in Chicago because I want it to, like, traditional book events are fun and I can't wait to do them. But I was like, I really want people to experience the book. I don't want them to just hear about it. And so I planned this massive party with like 15 art activists from across the country
Wow.
who are bringing their work in, and like a DJ, a drag show, like a quilt raffle. 80 people worked on this quilt so that we could raffle it off. And it's all a huge fundraiser for the Chicago Freedom School, which organizes, teaches the next generation of community organizers in Chicago. And I'm just like, yeah, this is going to be amazing. And my book was supposed to come out on October 15th. So I was like, cool. The party will be the 19th, and then I'll do my tour. And then they pushed my pub date up to October 1st. And they were like, it's cool. You'll just do the tour before the party. And I was like, do you understand what I have done? Like, what?
Oh no. Oh wow.
So it has just
Wow.
been this hardcore press to just be like, I have to get everything done for this party on the 19th before I leave. So no big deal.
Wow.
It's fine. But anybody who is in or around Chicago had better be at this party because it's going to be epic.
Y'all.
And it is
Yeah.
October 19th, and it's going to be a party. And then after that, I am in the Midwest for the winter. And then in February, I do my West Coast tour. And then in March, I'm in Utah.
Okay. And where
That's
can
as much as I know
Okay.
so far.
are you okay? Sorry, I was about to get into okay. I'll look at your schedule because I'm hoping I can come see you in person somewhere.
I think the closest is DC. Like,
Oh.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't go much further south this time. But
Okay.
I was in North Carolina on my book tour and taught at Salem College for a
Oh.
semester. So I was like parked in Winston-Salem.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
Oh.
And so you did a farm show recently.
I'm doing a show at someone's farm tomorrow.
Yeah.
There. Yeah. Okay.
So
yeah.
that delightful family was like, do you want to stay on our property? And I was like, yes, I do. And then I went there and I was like, I do, but it is so far away from where I'm teaching and I can't move the RV every time I got to go. So I didn't end up, but we have stayed connected ever since. And when I saw, I was like, oh my God, it's on Abby's farm.
Oh my God. Oh, it's on. Oh, wow. That is crazy.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
So
goodness.
I was
wow.
just like, again, like another small world. But I
that's beautiful.
definitely will get back to Winston-Salem because I have so many wonderful people there. And I was like, well, I think I need to get back there. I built some community there and I want to circle back.
Yeah. They need a little hit.
Right?
Well, thank you so much for making the time in your busy pre-party, pre-tour calendar.
Happy to. Happy to.
Oh, so cool.
Thank you for
what a
thinking of
blessing.
me and inviting me in.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
When you are tempted to walk away from their reverie, you might hear them say, kid, we are here. There's no reason to fear. Won't you join us as often as you are able at the big table?
Jess Klein's Big Table is produced by me, Jess Klein, and recorded on the traditional lands of the Lumbee, Chiraw, Catawba, Saponi, Occaneechi, Eno, and Shakori people. If you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you did, please subscribe, please like, and please share it with your people. You can find out more about my upcoming tour dates and musical releases at jessklein.com or on my Substack. Talk to you soon.